Thank you so much, Sam, for joining us on a podcast at Dawdle. Extremely grateful that you took out time to share your insights with our global audience. Dawdle.Live has a global audience of 125,000 plus CXOs and senior leaders who watch the podcast. And we're pretty sure that this session that we're having with you will add a lot of value to them. Before we jump onto the topic, Sam, would be great if you could introduce yourself, give a context of your journey so far to our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for having me on this episode. I've been looking forward to it. So at the moment, I'm currently the head of marketing for a tech company called iNexus. So we have strategy software that's designed to effectively take all the old stuff out of spreadsheets and PowerPoints and make it a bit more modern, a bit more digital, and a bit more collaborative. But before that, I was originally joined the British Army. So I spent 6 years in the British Army before stumbling by complete accident into marketing. So I started working in the public sector when I left the army, doing campaign management for not-for-profits and similar organizations, and then decided that whilst I enjoyed the marketing side of things, didn't so much enjoy the sector, landed a job as a tech marketer for a company called Ingram Micro, so a fairly large technology distributor, and it just went from there. Something I never thought about doing when I was growing up, never something I expected to be doing, but absolutely love the job, and it's something that I get a lot of enjoyment from, which I think is quite rare in people's work as well.
Yeah. So related to this, I've got a first topic for you is that your professional journey has moved from highly structured environments, you were in the army, into a dynamic marketing leadership. So how do you think that those early experiences have shaped your decision-making and leadership style in business?
Yeah, so I would say whilst the military environment is obviously very structured and very disciplined, it's also the kind of environment that trains people to react to chaos and changing situations. And I think that is the real takeaway skill from it. That whilst you have all the systems and the processes and the structure in place for when things are going well, inevitably things will go wrong. And that's when you need to be reactive to the situation as it unfolds. And that translates very much into a business world as well. We all set our strategies at the start of the year or the start of a quarter. We all have our marketing campaigns that we have planned to go out, and then something will happen. It could be a project gets delayed. It could be the website suddenly goes down on launch day. It's the ability to react to those changing environments without having a panic or a stress and just being able to tackle it one issue at a time until you get through it. Or the most transferable skill I took away from time in the military. But also I had a slightly different role when I was in the military as well. So I was a linguist. So much of my role was around working with people and particularly people from different cultures and different backgrounds. Particularly I specialized in the Levant regions, Iraq, Syria, as well as Afghanistan and Pakistan. And having an understanding of how different people think and how different cultures work naturally translates into marketing, because you have to be able to understand how people's brains work, what their motivations are going to be, why people will buy the thing you're trying to sell to them. And ultimately, the art of a marketer is making people realize that they want to buy something that they don't necessarily need or want until they've heard you tell them that they need and want it. So it works very well for me that having that almost, it's not a psychology background, but it's very much a psychology and sociology career that I had before going into marketing.
Absolutely. And, when we talk about marketing, structure and creativity often coexist. So how do you balance data discipline with the human element of storytelling?
I think with marketing, they're two sides of the same coin, because as much as you must be data-driven when you're making your decisions, when you're looking at what channels to invest in, at the same time, it's not always going to be black and white, because there's so many things in marketing that don't have an intrinsic value or an intrinsic metric. And if I take brand marketing as a perfect example, how do you measure awareness? How do you measure the perception of your brand? Obviously, some ways that you can get an idea of it, you can do your focus groups or whatever, but you're never going to really understand the true impact that is having, especially when you look at it later down the pipeline. At iNexus, we have our own podcast. And the whole idea of our podcast was we're not going to set any metrics around it. We're just going to see what happens with it. We're just going to run the podcast how we want to and see what comes off the back of it. And it was probably about a year before we released the first episode when someone, in fact more actually, it was about 18 months, someone came up to me at an event and said, and we had a banner for the podcast next to our company band. And someone came up to me and says, "Oh, we didn't realize you guys were doing this podcast. That's really great. I listen to it all the time." But that one moment, it was the sort of the evidence that it was working, that we were getting the brand out there. But at the same time, you still need to be looking at all the core elements that come into your job as well, because brand by itself does not pay the bills. But at the same time, it is a huge element to make everything else you do easier.
Absolutely. So we'll talk a bit about B2B marketing, Sam. So, if you see traditionally, B2B marketing often has focused on awareness and lead volume. But today, you see the success being tied to pipeline ownership and revenue contribution. So how do you approach this shift?
I suppose for me, it's ultimately the job of a marketer is to run sales at scale. That is ultimately the job in the simplest terms. So if you're not looking at what is happening at the entire length of your funnel, then you're not doing your job properly. So whenever I'm setting the targets for my team or working with CEO to set the targets for the department, the first thing I'm looking at is what are the revenue contributions the business needs to make, or what are the revenue targets the business needs to make, and how can marketing support into that? And I work backwards from that point. Everything that gets designed and everything that gets set for my team or an individual campaign or whatever always has to be driving towards that single golden number of how will this help us hit our revenue targets or our growth targets or whatever it might be that we're focusing on.
Got it. And we see a multi-channel approach inside B2B marketing where you have a lot of partner-led ecosystem as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how can marketing leaders like you create a cohesive buyer experience across digital, field, as well as channel touchpoints?
It's a massive challenge. Whether you're bringing a new hire into the department or whether you're working with an agency or whether you're working with a channel partner, you're always going to have the challenge of they don't know everything that you know as intrinsically as you do. And in some cases, they're not going to have the same motivators, or in many cases, they're not going to have the same motivators. A channel partner is going to be looking at their own revenue targets. They're going to be looking at their own growth targets. They're not going to be understanding necessarily the brand story that you're trying to create or the long-term goals of you as a business unless they're a particularly close strategic partner. So it is always a risk, and you need to actually accept that you're never going to get it 100% right. But what you can do is start giving them the materials to help them have an easier life with it. Ultimately, if you've got a channel partner that you go, cool, I want you to do a campaign, I want you to launch our product in this market that you're going into, and I want you to create everything from scratch and figure it all out for yourself, then they're going to either cut corners, they're going to get it wrong, or they're just not going to do it at all. Whereas if you actually work with them and become a strategic partner to them, you give your marketing expertise, you help loan people from the team. I'm a big fan of secondments. Hey, for the next 6 months, take for a day a week, you can have my graphic designer, and they're going to design all the material for you. If you give them the resources and the ability from within your own team and your own resources, then it's going to make their life so much easier, and they're going to want to work with you more, and they're going to want to get it right because they'll see the value in that partnership beyond just whatever revenue sharing scheme you've got in place with them.
Yes. And how do you decide, such channel partners? Like, what are the criteria that's there? What do you look into a good channel partner?
I think it's a willingness to collaborate is a big one. There's obviously a huge amount of value in having the sort of your massive multinational resellers who will just push the product out. But that's not what we do as a business at iNexus. We often hear from our customers that the most valuable thing that they get from us is actually our people. It's nothing to do with the software because we'll work with them almost as a consultancy. We'll help them build their strategies. We'll show them the best practices. So we need a partner that's going to collaborate with us and learn all of those things with us or come with those skills or complement those skills and deliver that same level of experience. So anyone can sell software, especially in a B2B environment. It's not particularly difficult, but where it becomes difficult is giving the value in that software. And the vast majority of B2B purchasers, certainly in the SaaS space, they churn within the first year or on the first renewal because they don't get that value that they were promised in the sales process. And the only way you can deliver that is through varying degrees of enablement, whether that's an online learning platform, whether that's people working day in, day out. But you have to give that value beyond just what the software does.
Yeah, absolutely. So churn prevention is something which is so very important. And that is what I feel is that a real CAC is to LTV ratio comes around somewhere, it goes as high as 3:1 for a lot of SaaS companies or technology companies. So if you have the right channel partners in place, I think the churn will be lesser and you will derive more value out of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the challenge we've got is if you're trying to scale a SaaS business, I work for a small business at the moment. If you're trying to scale a SaaS business, you can't deliver that level of care to every single customer without, making ridiculous levels of hiring, and it just becomes complicated. Your margin completely goes out the window. But if you can work with the channel partners to help amplify your reach and help amplify that value you're giving, that's where you're going to be able to give that value at scale.
Yeah. And what do you think is the role of tools like, you have HubSpot, you have CRM intelligence platforms, you have performance analytics. What is the role that they play in connecting marketing impact directly with the sales outcomes?
So I think it's a visibility thing. And the interesting one, so I used to work for a HubSpot partner in the past. So I'm a massive evangelist for HubSpot. But people are also moving away from CRMs.
Yes.
The future of how we actually work isn't going to be in a HubSpot for sure. It's going to be in different platforms, different systems that are all connected together. And the reason why that change is being shifted is because people need that level of visibility. They need that level of awareness of what is happening at every single stage. For example, if I send a meeting over to our sales lead, he can get the basic information. He can go on Google, he can look at the guy's LinkedIn profile and see the simple stuff. But where he's going to get the value is understanding the context of what drove him to that moment. He needs to have a visibility on that. And that can't be done with any single platform. There's platforms like On24 for webinars, which give insights to how much they've actually listened, what questions they've asked, what they've engaged to. There's things like Zoom Info giving me intelligence in the background, particularly when it comes to buying signals and stuff like that. All of this helps build up the picture, which makes that salesperson's job easier, because if they understand the journey they took to get there, then they know what questions to ask, they know what objections they're likely to face, and ultimately they know where they can deliver that value in the sales conversation as well.
Absolutely. And Sam, a tough one is that, if you have to choose one metric to judge modern marketing success, what would that be?
It is a tough one, because there is no single metric that really does define it, but ultimately marketing is not a cost center. Marketing is a revenue generation. So it has to be tied to the revenue. Marketing attributed revenue is ultimately the golden number. You can have all the leads in the world, you can have all the website visits, but if you're not delivering that revenue at the end, you're not functioning as a department.
Got it. Now we'll kind of, we'll try to pick up your mind on a few GTM, frameworks which are there. And you have led multiple go-to-market motions across diverse, SaaS products. What's the most critical step that you feel is there while you're building a GTM framework that scales?
It's got to be simplicity. So there's a concept that I like to introduce. I've done it at a few different businesses now, which I sort of term as building tool. You find out where your easiest wins are going to be. You find out where you're doing best, where your customer success teams have the most growth opportunities or most upsells, where the sales velocity is a little bit shorter. You find that niche market and you get really, really good at that one segment. Whether it might be a territory, it might be an industry, whatever it might be. And you build your content engine around that. You build your marketing channels around that. You build the automations around that. So that one system is perfected. That can take a year, 18 months, 2 years to get to a point where you've mastered that channel or that route to market. But then once you've got that, you've got a repeatable recipe. You've learned what worked, and then you can start tailoring it for different industry. If, for example, you decide, I'm going to go after manufacturers in Germany, that's going to be my focus, it becomes so much easier then to switch it. So, we've got manufacturers in Germany, let's do manufacturers in France now, let's do manufacturers in the UK, let's do manufacturers in the US. And then once you've done the markets, you can then go, okay, well, we've done manufacturers, what's similar to them? Let's do automotives, let's do pharmaceuticals who have similar needs and challenges, and we'll do the same thing again. So you've got to build that strong foundation and that single pathway perfectly, or as perfectly as you can get, and then turn it into that repeatable recipe.
Absolutely. This is very insightful. And once you talk about product marketing, it kind of serves as a bridge between engineering, sales, and customer success. What's the secret to aligning these functions towards a shared outcome?
It's something actually that, it's very much a big focus for me right now is getting this right. So we've just launched a new product, which is very much product-led growth-based, swipe your credit card, get started straight away. There's no sales process or anything like that. And it means I've had to be so much more, so much closer to the sales team, because although they're not selling, still the revenue targets, just still the overall sales strategy behind it, and to the product team as well. We've gone from releasing a new feature every 3 months to releasing every couple of days now. The only way you can be that close is by being in the room. So I will join the product teams on their stand-ups. I'll be sat there talking to them about different features that they're working on, giving feedback as they go through, because that helps my learning curve. I can understand the thinking behind it every single release. I can understand how it's actually going to work in practice. And even I can sit there testing some of these things as well. And at the same time, while I'm testing it for the product team, I can sit there making videos. I can make my content. So it's just about being in the room with the product team, being part of that conversation, because we like to live in our silos. We like to think, okay, marketing, I'm going to focus on my campaign. Product, I'm going to focus on the roadmap. Sales, I'm going to focus on my pipeline. But once you break down those silos and start just blurring those lines between departments, it becomes so much easier, because everyone starts being more aligned to the same goals. The product team gets more aware of what the strategy is from a marketing point of view. They become more aware of what the sales targets are.
Are they really interested? Like, do you see them really interested in that? Like how do you align them? Like, what is the motivation?
It really depends on the person. I mean, a developer is going to have very different gratification to a product owner or a salesperson, but mostly it's just being open and honest and telling them what is actually happening after they do the work. A developer could spend 2-3 weeks trying to get a perfect login page with all the different elements that need to be covered there, and then they'll release it, and then they'll move on to the next thing, and they'll never hear anything about how their work actually impacted the product. So if I join a call and I say, okay, since you released that feature, we've seen sign-up rates increase by 7%, or we've seen we see people using this feature this much, giving them that feedback of how their work is actually giving value will naturally motivate anyone.
Absolutely. And I heard that, a lot of these product and tech guys, they love it when they see that their product is being used by the customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people don't think of developers as a creative industry, but they are creative. They're building things. They're creating absolute wonders from nothing. And it terrifies me to even look at some of the code sometimes because it makes no sense to me. But if you're creating something, you want to see how it works, how it lands, what the feedback is going to be.
And if you look ahead, Sam, like, how do you see these AI and all these predictive analytics changing the way product marketers are positioning and messaging, especially for technology solutions?
The biggest challenge that we're facing right now is that content is becoming so much easier and there is a lot of noise out there. And I'm even seeing stuff now where people are accusing stuff of being AI content when it's definitely not AI content. And so it's hurting a lot of trust when it comes to thought leadership, content generation generally. And this is largely because people are getting a little bit lazy with it. They are using it just to churn out a blog every single day, but it's not actually giving any real value to it. So I can see the type of content we consume is going to change drastically. Obviously, podcasts have been a big thing for a long time now, but I think that's only going to increase. I think people are going to be listening more to audio content and video content, which, whilst not impossible, are much harder to push through AI. But at the same time, there is a massive advantage to this as well, because we can use these tools to make our life so much easier and our jobs so much easier that we can spend more time on the stuff that only people can do, having these conversations. Prime example with the podcast, there's plenty of AI tools that you can upload this to and it'll give you the transcript ready. It'll cut little clips out of it and create your show reels to put on social media. So it means rather than spending 6 hours in post-production, you can spend maybe an hour in post-production and spend more time researching and getting ready to have a guest.
Now, Sam, also want to take your insights on Europe as a market. So, so how do you see that market? Because when I talk to a lot of leaders inside Europe, they say that people are risk averse. They don't want to try new innovations. They want to trust a established brand. What's your opinion on that? And what's your take on that?
I think definitely people are being a lot more risk averse, both in European markets and also US markets right now. The economic backdrop is definitely playing a lot of people's minds. We're seeing a lot of organizations who are either making drastic cost savings through staffing or through technology that they're currently using. So people are naturally going to not want to be the one to take the risk and be the one who stood there saying, hey, I've just spent 50 grand on this software and it hasn't worked, sorry. Because that pressure is there. That pressure is going to make people more cautious. And I think the only way that you can really get around that is through reputation. And that's used to be, you look at a brand and go, okay, they're saying the right things, they're talking about the good stuff, or, they might hit the right CSR categories that we want them to be doing, stuff like that. But I think now it's going to come more down to actually having other people and word of mouth, recommendations, case studies, giving that authenticity from other ways. And I think as well, we're going to see a lot more of particularly leaders bringing technology and people with them as they move between organizations and departments as well. I mean, it's something I've been doing for a long time. I've probably been using largely the same tech stack now for the last 8 years, because you find what works and you keep it with you and you take it on. There's plenty of vendors now, but I've been a repeat customer where they start going through the demo with me and I'm just like, yeah, you can skip all this. Just show me the new stuff because I know all of this stuff now. That is going to become absolutely key moving forward, I think, especially as newer markets start dominating as well. I mean, you look at East Asia particularly, that is becoming absolutely huge, as they're starting to counteract the whole Trump effect with the tariffs and everything like that. We're seeing a lot of manufacturers moving their operations to places like Cambodia and Vietnam. And as these markets emerge, they're going to be more boisterous. They're going to be more confident. They're going to take the risks. They're going to push that a little bit further and that a little bit faster. And that similarly is going to do one or two things in the more established markets in Europe. They're either going to double down and be more risk averse and say, we're not going to take any gambles. We need to secure our base. Or they're going to start making some uncalculated risks and they're going to make some mistakes. And then that's going to naturally drag them back into that risk averse state.
That's nice. And what's that secret marketing stack that you have been using for the last 10 years?
It's quite a few. I mean, HubSpot has long been a feature. The amount of times I've joined a business and migrated from Salesforce to HubSpot is, I don't even want to think of it now. On24 is a regular one for me. Zoom Info as well is a regular one for me. Cognism as well has played in a few times. And even now there's newer tools that are coming about will absolutely be part of my future set. Like Opus being a key one of those, and there's one, Optio. Optio is a fantastic one, actually. It's like $10 a month or something like that. You plug it into your Google Ads and it just analyzes everything. It's a lot of little tools, but they're regular repeaters. And even like forgetting the tech stack, there's also marketing agencies that I would work with every time now as well. I'm currently onboarding a new agency who he used to be the sheet director at an old agency we worked with and gone off and started his own marketing agency. And we're onboarding him as a customer because I trust him. It's nothing to do with his team or his company. I trust him as an individual.
And that's so very important, like, that individual's trust, kind of translates into trusting that entire organization.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about growth marketing, and it kinds of, blends creative experimentation with analytical rigor. So how do you, kind of foster this dual mindset within your team?
I can give a good example, actually. So having just launched a new product, we're pushing it into some new markets as well. And particularly this is designed for a much more SMB space rather than enterprise, which is where we traditionally played. And actually, because of that, we saw some really great results from our marketing campaigns, particularly when it comes to website traffic. So we shot up by, I think it was about 8 or 9 times website traffic in between 2 months. Like, it was absolutely insane. But my marketing manager came to me and said, look at this, it's absolutely fantastic. One of the things he was highlighting was how well we was doing on YouTube. We was running some ads and we got like 600,000 views within the first 2 weeks. That translated to like 100,000 website clicks. Like, the conversions were fantastic. And you have to be the bad guy when you have those, because those are great metrics. They are fantastic. And I said, that's absolutely brilliant. But what's happening to them after they actually come to us?
Yes.
Are they converting? Are they doing anything? And
Yes.
that's the trick. You have to always look back. Well, like we were saying about the golden KPI, you always have to look back at, is it moving down the pipe? Is it contributing to our actual goals, or is it just a vanity metric?
Absolutely. That's so true. And, I hear a lot of marketing leaders, nothing against them, but I hear them, kind of taking pride in kind of they've invested $100,000 on Google ads or $200,000 on LinkedIn ads. And then I'm like kind of confused that is it the right metric that they're talking
Yeah.
about? They're proud of that.
Well, that's it. That is measuring actions, not results. Ultimately, I would much rather spend 10,000 on Google ads than 100,000 and get the same results. But the problem is when you start looking at those early numbers, or what what we just call sort of the leading KPIs, the leading indicators, they paint a story. They tell you what might be happening and what could happen in the future, but they are not the end result. They're not what you should focus on. And, similar to you, I see it all the time with other marketing leaders where they start talking about leads, they start talking about MQLs, but that is not the important number. It doesn't matter how many meetings you get for your sales team if none of those meetings convert.
Absolutely. Nice to hear a marketing leader talking of this. And, the next is about, so you have touched upon this, is that, so how do you balance brand marketing with demand generation? Should one lead, or can both reinforce each other?
I think both reinforces each other. So I always like to create a narrative that spans over several years, and that plays into all the activities that we're doing. At the moment, the narrative that we're running is built around the democratization of strategy. So getting more people involved in strategy, using tools to make it easier to collaborate, to work together, to design the goals and the objectives as a team, rather than it just being the C-suite setting the objectives and just telling everyone what's going to happen. So that narrative is set. That was set probably about 18 months ago for us now. And now that that's in place, everything we do goes back to it. Is how can we pull in the research that we did around this? How can we pull in that story? How can we build that story when it comes to our campaigns, when it comes to our BAU marketing? Everything feeds back into it. But that's where the value brand comes in, and it's why it's often neglected. Because people will run a campaign for 3 months and then they'll completely switch to tack and they'll do something completely different. And it becomes disruptive. There's no cohesive story throughout, because people seem to think that you launch a campaign and that's the only thing that anyone's ever going to see. So they can just focus on that messaging. But if it doesn't link to everything else you're doing, if it doesn't link to how your website looks, how your people speak, it's all going to fall apart. And even now so our podcast is superhero themed. We talk about strategy heroes. Yeah. When we launched our new product, that was superhero themed, and the marketing for this new product is all around being the hero of your own strategy. And we are hopefully going to be announcing an event next year, which is going to be all around strategy heroes again. And it's keeping that cohesive theme all throughout.
How do you see the role of thought leadership and podcasting specifically evolving as a part of brand trust and community building strategies?
So I think it shows the human element more than anything. It shows the people, but also it has a separate advantage that when you start bringing people into podcasts, especially if you're running it as a completely separate entity to your core business. So, for example, we sell software. We don't There's nothing our podcast talks about software related unless the guest brings it up naturally. We certainly don't push our own product. We don't even have our logo on the podcast. But what we do find is we get talking to some really interesting people, and that starts opening doors for us. The amount of new partners that we found by pure chance, the amount of, introductions we've had. So we had a recent guest, a chap called Martin Reeves. So he's the chairman of the Henderson Institute of the Boston Consulting Group. So for anyone who doesn't know, Boston Consulting Group are the third largest consultancy in the world. So this was like a massive name for us. We was very excited to have him on board. And we recorded the episode, and then our CEO is the host of our podcast, and they had a little conversation after, start talking about a conference that Martin was going to be at, invited him over so he could fly out, he'll introduce us to more people. It's about building that network, and that's where the real value is going to come from. It's no longer possible for us to do this by ourselves, both from an organization point of view and as a marketer point of view. You need to be building these relationships. You need to be expanding that channel and stop thinking of the channel as just being resellers. It's about those connections. It's about those strategic partners and those thought leadership partners as well.
So what are the traits that you consider to be very essential for the next generation of marketing leaders?
Curiosity, 100% is going to be key. But this will be probably a little bit controversial, but I think laziness is actually going to be quite important. So there is logic behind that. But if you're going to take advantage of all the new technology that's emerging on a daily basis at the moment, you need to want to cut corners. You need to want to save time. You need to be looking at AI and thinking, how can this do my job for me? How can this make my job easier? How can this cut the corners and save the time so I can focus on the good stuff? So having that natural desire to actually save yourself time and save yourself work is going to be absolutely key, because the people who do that are going to be able to do so much more. I think how even the way I work has evolved over the last 2 years, particularly. I'm infinitely more productive. I'm probably doing the workload of 4 or 5 people compared to 2 years ago. And that's because I've taken advantage of where I can use these tools to automate, where I can use them to streamline systems. Prime example that I use on a regular basis is competitor research. I've built a custom GPT model that just will go straight through whenever I ask it, all our competitors' website, news releases, stuff like that, and just give me a report that I can then share with the leadership team and say, this is what our competitors have been up to in the last month. That was previously a task that would take 4 or 5 hours. Now it takes 15 minutes. But unless you're hunting for those opportunities to save time, then you're going to fall behind, because I'm not going to, if I'm hiring someone and I ask them a question, how do you use AI, and say, oh no, I like to do all my own work, then that interview is basically going to be over at that point. I want people to come to me and say, I'm using AI to do this. I'm using it to save time. I'm using it to cut this corner. I'd much prefer someone tell me a story about how they got AI to do their job for them, and they finished work at 3 o'clock every day because there's nothing left to do. That's the kind of person I want to work with. So for me, I very much believe in throwing the hand grenades, giving people the opportunities to fail ultimately, and people have to be comfortable with failing. And you can take your time and show someone how to do every single thing. And this does vary, obviously, depending on how junior someone is as well. I'm sort of more thinking like your middle to your management sort of level of experience. If you want to push someone to go outside of their comfort zone, you need to give them the opportunity to just try and experiment things. You need to give them those tasks. You need to give them those things to run with. And they're not going to get it right every time, and that's fine. But then you have your retrospective. You talk about what worked and what didn't work. And the next time you do it, we'll iterate that a little bit better. And that has 2 advantages. One, it gives them the confidence to actually just try stuff and experiment on their own, which is absolutely key. But also it gives you more breathing space as a leader as well, because you can't spend that much time with every single person in your team, teaching them everything and developing every single step of the way. But if you just give them the tasks, give them the challenges, give them the resources that they need to go and run with it, you suddenly find you've got so much more time as well. You can focus on your projects. You can focus on your own work. Oh, about British Army. The biggest one that comes to mind is the people. The style of working is very different, and it took me a long time when I left the army to learn how to be a civilian again. There are jokes that you just cannot say in normal civilian or corporate life. There are things that you just can't do. Back then it was normal, and even now I think back on some of the moments and I'm like, it was absolutely insane what we did. How could we be like that and consider it to be normal? So I miss the people and the environment 100%. But at the same time, I love the variety that came with the work as well. Especially when I was deployed, I spent a lot of time working with the Afghan National Army or meeting with village elders. You got so much exposure to the way different people live. And, we all live very sheltered lives. We see what's in front of us and that's it. So having those opportunities to be thrust outside of your comfort zone, just have to really get down and understand how other people experience life is absolutely fascinating as well. So I do miss those opportunities. And it actually is a little goal of mine in my personal side now to try and rekindle some of those moments, do a bit more traveling, push myself back out there. Anyone, it's just sort of bit. Problem is, there's so many that are coming to mind right now. It's just trying to think what would be appropriate to share. But I will share one that does kind of home in a little bit on just how insane the culture was. So it was quite typically a normal work routine when you was in British Armies. You'd be working Monday to Friday, and then you'd be off on the weekend unless there was anything particular to do. And when I was based out in Germany, and I was 17 when I first went to Germany, I would start the day. I'd wake up about 5:30, and we'd go out for a run. Like everyone would go out and do exercise together at 6:30. I'd then have breakfast, and then I would finish work until 10:30, then 10:30 till usually only about 12 we'd have lunch, and then there wouldn't really be anything to do in the afternoon. So that would be the daily routine, and then that would be me done for the day. So I'd be in my own time, and I would go down to the swim bath, swim a few laps. I'd go down to the sauna, get back about maybe 3 o'clock with a pack of beer in hand, and we would just start drinking, and we would go through to like 1-2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes later, and then we'd be back into that routine again, waking up first thing in the morning, going on a 5, 6, 8 mile run or whatever it was we were doing that day, and being absolutely fine, and being able to run that cycle on repeat for days on end. It's just, yeah, absolutely. I would die these days. I think these days if I had 4 beers, I would probably be hungover and definitely not able to go for a run, but that was just the normal. Well, when I was in the army, as my brother was also in the army at the same time, and then I had a sister and my mum as well, who were obviously worried about both of us. But these days, I'm a single dad, so I have a 2.5-year-old daughter who definitely challenges me. She was a little bit ill this week, so I ended up losing half a day of work to looking after her because she was a little bit sick, but wouldn't change the world. And I would say, I don't know, do you have kids, Rishi? Planning to have kids, planning. I would say the biggest shock for me, and it seems so self-explanatory and almost cliched to say it, but how much my priorities changed after my daughter was born. My career goals, while still the same, are now motivated for different reasons entirely now. The things I do, the way I act, it's all shifted since having a child, because everything now is about building a life for her. I'm no longer building a life for me anymore. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Singapore is definitely on the list. Mhm. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.